What's up, little bro? It's
Little
me,
bro.
Dean Winchester. Sammy, you're my little brother.
Hello and welcome to Super Hell, aka the Mystery Spotcast, a show where two recovering Supernatural fans subject themselves to a rewatch so no one else ever has to watch Supernatural again. We've heard some reports that some people have started watching Supernatural or thought about it because of this show. I have to reiterate, we are suffering through this so that you don't have to. I promise. We are taking the brunt of this pain for you.
We are doing this for you, not for us. Don't do what we do. You don't have to do this.
Yeah, this is, please watch anything else. We'll talk actually later about what you should watch instead. We're going to bring back our favorite segment. Actually, queer media you should watch instead. My name is Klaudia. My pronouns are she, her. You can find me on social media at Klaudia says, K-A-L-U-D-I-A says.
And I'm Ollie. I use any pronouns. You can find me on social media at Ollie Fresh. It's fresh with a PH. Are we ready to get into it? We're in the end game now. To quote Doctor Strange.
No.
Is that who says it?
I believe so. Yeah, like basically the end of season 1. It's a 3-part finale. So this week we're going to be talking about the first 2 parts, and then the big last part we're going to talk about next week, and then talk about season 1 as a whole. So it'll be a little season 1 special. There's a lot going on.
This is like, here's the thing. I think that talking about these parts is going to be a little shorter. Not that it's going to be super short, but these really do just like get to the point. Like a lot of the heavy stuff from this is not from the actual plot, like the monster. A lot of the heavy stuff is like interpersonal drama.
And that's what Supernatural's about.
Supernatural, it's once again where I'm like, what is this show about? Like, I don't know what this show is about.
It's about having really emotional talks with your brother in the car. That's all it's about. Do you want to take us into our first episode called Dead Man's Blood?
I would love to. This episode was crazy. It was truly out of pocket. We see the exterior of a bar, and there's a little pop-up that says Manning, Colorado. We go inside of this bar and we see this man. He's an older gentleman, and he's like frantically scribbling in this journal. And the waitress is like, oh, do you want another drink? And he's like, yeah, sure. And there's a guy sitting on the other side of the bar, and he's like talking to the waitress, and they're looking at this dude writing, and the guy goes, oh, I thought they caught the Unabomber.
I was like, oh, what a reference.
This is such a dated reference. And the lady's like, oh no, Daniel's fine. He's just like that. And then this group of people, very hip, young people, walk in, and Daniel is like, no, that is not happening. The older man, Daniel, he gets up and he fucking sprints out of there. He's like, I'm not doing that. He runs into his house and he starts like going through all of his shit. He's like getting his weapons, and this girl, the girl who was like leading the group, walks in and she's like, hey. And he's like, nope. And he runs into his office and barricades the door and starts putting together this like 5-shot Colt revolver. And it's very ornate and it looks very slay, but it's in this box, and he's like loading the gun. And then 2 of these guys that were with her jump down into the house from the ceiling.
It's very Spider-Man. You're like, Jesus. Yeah.
Then she kicks the barricade down and walks in, and she's like, a gun? You thought a gun was going to kill us, you fucking idiot. Anyway, and then they murder him. And then it's like Supernatural title screen.
I love when you say it, because you're like, it's like Supernatural.
I like to have some consistency in my presentation.
Yeah.
Then we go to Sam and Dean, our 2 friends. They're in Nebraska. They are looking over.
I thought you said our 2 friends, and I was like, no, they're brothers.
No, they're our friends.
Like, are they?
They're my friends. You don't think that we would be friends with them? We'd be
Absolutely not.
We'd be like, we're just like you, except we're podcasters and not hunters. And we're
gay, just like you.
They're at this diner near Nebraska, and they are looking through the news, like through newspapers and stuff, trying to find their next job. And Dean is like, oh man, I don't know, it's kind of slow. And Sam's like, okay, what about this? This is a person who has woman falls 10,000 feet from a plane and lives. And Dean's like, that sounds like more of just like a, whoa, what a miracle, as opposed to our kind of thing. And Sam's like, I know, you're right. Okay, what about this? There's this guy, Daniel Elkins. He just died. They said it was a bear attack, but now they're saying it's a robbery. No, I don't know. And Dean is like, I swear I've heard that name before. And he opens up their dad's journal and finds the contact information for someone named D. Elkins. So he's like, okay, well, clearly there was something going on, so we should go check it out. So they drive from Nebraska to Colorado to go and figure out what's going on. They get to the cabin and they walk in, and it's like in utter chaos. Like, it's been ransacked and it's just disgusting. And then in this wreckage of this house, Dean finds a journal and he's like, oh, this dude must be a player. Like, he's got to be a hunter because this journal looks just like Dad's. And then they find, like, scrawled into the ground some sort of message. So Dean puts down a piece of paper and takes a pencil and like does the thing where you draw over it to try to get the imprint to appear on the paper. And he finds it, and it's like a combination to a post office box. So they go to the post office and open the safe and find a letter.
Well, and he also is like, oh, it's just like the way Dad did it. So this is like the second time where they're like, okay, so he's a journal just like Dad. And now he's like sending messages, like emergency messages, just like Dad. That's odd and weird.
Yeah, they're like, that's a little strange. So they open this post office box and they find a letter that just says JW on it. And they're like, oh my gosh. And here's what's funny, a little thing for me. I have a dog whose name is JW. It's short for John Williams. His name is JW. So I was like, why are they writing a letter to my dog? And then I was like, oh, I'm stupid. So they're like, oh, JW, like, you don't think that could be John Winchester? And then the scariest jump scare happens, in which we see Sam and Dean talking, and Dean is like looking at it. And then we see a person appear in the window of the car, because they're sitting in the car, a person appear in the window and just be like, hey guys, it's John Winchester.
Which quite possibly is the scariest jump scare in all of Supernatural, because who is scarier than that fucking raggedy bitch John Winchester?
No, literally, I was watching it also. As you'll know, you're a longtime listener. I do watch these episodes on 1.5 speed. That happened so fast. It was like he freaking jumped in like he was the Flash. I was terrified.
Ezra Miller,
no. They give John the letter. And he's like, okay, slay. So he starts reading it. And then they're like, hey, what are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, I heard about Daniel and I saw you guys snooping around in the house. So yeah, I had to come to make sure that you weren't being followed and make sure you weren't being watched. And also Daniel knew some stuff anyway. And they're like, okay, Dad, you can't just like be like, whatever, like you have to tell us what's going on. And Sam is having this issue where he's like, dude, you can't just show up and be like, okay, I'm going to be in charge now. Like, you need to give us some information about what's going on.
He's like, we are whole adults.
Yeah. And John's like, so cool. Anyway, I'm going to read this letter now. So he's reading this letter and he's like, son of a bitch. He had it the whole time. And they're like, what? What did he have? And John is like, did you guys see a gun while you were in there? Like an old Colt revolver? And Dean is like, yeah, we found a box, but it was completely empty. And he's like, damn it. They're like, okay, so like, do you want to elaborate on that? And he's like, oh, okay. In 1835, Samuel Colt, the gun maker, made a gun that had 13 bullets.
When Halley's Comet was
overhead, and the bullets shot from this gun could kill anything.
He made it for a hunter. And specifically, he does say he made it for a hunter. And they were on horseback in those days. Like, it's very important that in these days, hunters are in cars. But then they were on horseback in those days. And you're like, this sounds like a Ford car commercial.
No, he's like, dun, 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 dun.
Welcome to the Ford summer sales event.
Happy Pride to Dean Winchester. Happy Ford summer sales event to John Winchester.
Happy Honda days to Sam Winchester.
Do we think Sam would have a Tesla?
Actually, no. I think he would want have one. Like a Toyota Camry, but he like wouldn't fit in it because he's like, it's environmentally friendly. And Dean's like, you don't fit in that car. You're like 6 feet tall.
I know he wants a Tesla though. Like he always sees it and he's like, I wish I had that so bad.
Yeah, and he's friends with like Crowley, who's like, Crowley's like, hey, you know that like Elon Musk is like the worst person ever and I'm from hell.
I don't know if you saw during over the winter, those people who would post videos of their Tesla doors getting frozen shut because it doesn't have a handle. Dean is like, do you want that to happen to you, idiot? Yeah. That's going to happen to you.
And he's like, no, it wouldn't. Like, I'm fine. I love when Sam Winchester is inadvertently stupid.
So John explains this gun, and then he's like, in this letter, Daniel Elkins which is the gentleman's name who perished. He's like, Daniel had it this whole time and didn't tell me. He knows I've been looking for it. And Sam is like, we didn't even know this guy. Like, why didn't you ever, like, it sounds like clearly he was your friend. He's like, yeah, he taught me a lot about hunting, but we had a bit of a falling out.
Oh, that man is definitely going to be in the Winchesters, isn't he?
Oh, okay, that would be hilarious if they even remember that he exists.
Yeah, they probably won't.
But here's the sad thing is they don't really make it clear how old Daniel is supposed to be. Like, I think he's in his like 50s or 60s probably. And I'm like, that's got to be about how old John Winchester is. I'm just saying.
But they're like, oh, he's so much
post-marriage
older.
Rebound.
No,
because I'm saying, I think that...
No.
I feel like John Winchester has all these friends who I'm like, were you... I mean, he's missing his wife.
Concept is that, what if all these other hunters that he met, like, they thought that he was coming on to them, but he never knew. So he had all these, like...
He has 7 evil exes.
Yeah, he has 7 evil exes and, like, sweethearts who all were like, oh, yeah, like, I think we had something going on. We don't really know. And he just, like, thought they were, like, they were buds. They were going to Honda days, you know?
Babe, when you think he's taking you to Pride, but he's actually taking you to Happy Honda Days.
That's John Winchester.
I mean, I don't know why you'd be going to Pride in the middle of the holiday season, but I digress.
Yeah, so like Daniel Elkins was like trying to teach. They were having like a you know 30K enemies to lovers,
a steamy summer romance, dare I say.
But like John didn't really know that, and then he was like, anyway, so this is my friend.
When are we gonna start woobifying John Winchester?
No, we can't, please. No,
because the baby girlification of John Winchester,
it's gonna happen when the prequel comes out, and everyone's gonna forget about. It's just gonna be like Anakin Skywalker. They're gonna forget how he's a raggedy bitch, and everyone's gonna be like, but he's my little meow meow.
So this next scene is very funny because they're like, okay, well, so who has the gun? Like, where'd it go? And John is like, I think I figured out what attacked him. And they're like, what was it? And he's like, vampires. And Sam and Dean are both like, bitch, are you serious right now?
Okay, but here's the part that's crazy to me, is that Dean's like, I don't believe vampires are real. I'm like, you hunt ghosts for a living. You killed some Palpatine-looking ass thing. Like, vampires are... And also knowing that he dies because of some Juggalo clown vampires, it's like poetry.
No.
Because I'm like, I forgot. I just remember the vampires were like, they're just a part of the hunter thing. Like, most hunters know that they're real. But I guess John Winchester kept his sons in the dark about everything because they're like, oh yeah, vampires aren't real. I'm like, but you've met almost every other you met demons, but you're like, vampires, that's pushing it. Like,
because here's the thing that I was like, okay, I was willing to give Dean the concession of being like, okay, maybe because his dad never brought it up. So I'm like, okay, maybe he was like, well, if dad never brought it up, it's probably just some bullshit. But John is like, I thought they were extinct. He's like, I thought people like Daniel hunted them down and like they were all gone. But I guess they're not. Which is really funny because in later episodes, we do see other hunters talk about vampires and like hunt vampires. So I'm like, what is the truth, Supernatural?
I think
Stop
it's just
ignoring
that
your
John.
own canon.
I think it's just that John Winchester's stupid,
He's just a liar.
or he only has like 3 friends, which were all the people who were trying to fuck him. So he doesn't know anybody else, like, because there's all these other hunters, like, kind of throughout the rest of Supernatural. Like, what you'll realize is that like it's a far bigger world, and that's probably just because they were like, ah, shit, we got to build out this world. But it is like a far bigger world of like hunters who all talk to each other, and you realize more and more that like John was just this crazy fucking loner who was kind of insane. And like he had a couple of friends, he knew some people, and he had his network of whatever, but like he didn't engage with hunter society in any way. So like fucking hunter society, I hate this.
Hunter gatherer ass.
He didn't gather with
Where are the monster gatherers? Sam and Dean are taking a little nappy in their hotel room, and John is chilling, just, you know, listening to a police scanner.
As you do.
As one does. And he wakes him up. He's like, guys, we gotta go. I just heard this call. There's this abandoned car that was left behind by a young couple after they had just made a 911 call. We gotta go. We gotta go investigate. And Sam is like, okay, how do you know that this is what we're looking for? And he's like, I just don't ask questions. We need to go. And Sam is like, okay, whatever. So they get in the car and they go to, like, they get into their 2 cars. Sam and Dean have the Impala. And John has this, like, truck.
It's a monster truck.
It's like a monster truck. It's like...
Or it's a regular truck with mounted on monster truck wheels.
It's a lifted truck, like, it's like 12 inches lifted.
Yeah, are you compensating for something, John?
John bought his car from someone who was compensating for something.
Yeah. Actually, no, Bobby gave him that car to make him look like a clown.
Bobby was like, if you're gonna, here, take this comically large car if you're gonna keep acting like this.
Oh, Bobby, I miss you.
I can't wait. I can't wait for you guys to meet Bobby. They get to the abandoned car, and Sam is like, bitch, like, why? Like, there's nothing here. And he's like, you can't, you show up after being gone and you just start ordering us around. Like, you need to give us some information. Like, it is so disrespectful of you to just do this. And he and John kind of get into a bit of a tussle because John's like, it is too important right now for you to be asking questions. If you ask questions, people will die. Like, we need to be pedal to the metal. We have to go. We can't be questioning. And he's like, okay, but you can't just, like, order us around. And then they almost get into it. Like, John, like, grabs the lapels of Sam's jacket. And like, Sam is, like, pushing at him.
They're acting the fuck out of this scene. Yeah, so that scene is, like, really intense because they're getting in each other's faces. And Dean, who is like, I am the perfect son. This can't be happening. Like, he's literally having a mental breakdown in between them.
Dean is, like, standing between them. He's like, okay, everybody stop. Like, guys, please stop. We just have to do this thing. Once we do this thing, it's all gonna be fine. And John is like, fine. Okay. Well, we need to figure it out. So, cool. And Sam is like, I'm just gonna go sit in the car.
Well, and they're yelling these, like, and this is why you left us, whatever. I'm like, yeah, you go to college?
Yeah, that is the big argument, too, is Sam is like, oh, well, I didn't want you to order me around anymore. And you were mad because, like, you were mad that I left because you couldn't control me anymore. And
I'm like, okay.
John is like, okay, no. And he's like, yeah. And then you were like, why are you leaving? Like, don't come back. You closed that door. I didn't. I just wanted to go to fucking college. It's just crazy. They went into it, and Dean was like, please stop fighting.
Dean was having a bit of a moment.
Yeah. Then we cut to what the Supernatural Wiki describes as the vampire nest.
I mean, in Supernatural, they always call it a nest.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not saying that it's not,
yeah.
But I'm saying, like, it is called the vampire nest.
Yeah.
And it's basically just this old, decrepit building. It's like a barn.
Yeah, and you know what I did realize?
Mm-hmm.
I do believe it is the same barn
that they use in every single time they need a barn. They use this
Which
same
is
barn.
when Castiel is introduced, and also when Dean fucking dies on the rusty nail at the end. It's like poetry, it rhymes, because like the first time we see vampires, they're in the barn, and then the last time we see vampires is also when Dean dies at the end of the series in a barn on a rusty nail.
In the same barn.
In the same barn.
So we cut to this vampire nest, right? And Kate, the woman who was responsible for chasing Mr. Elkins, the one who was like kind of leading that charge, she is there and she's kind of like fucking with this young couple. And she's like, hee hee, you guys are fucked up. And basically allows them to, like, 2 other vampires in the nest to take the man from the couple and just kind of do what they will with him. And they leave the girl tied up. And then this other vampire, Luther, walks in. And Kate, again, the girl vampire, Kate is like, here, look, you know that bitch who you hate, who was fucking with your family and you? I killed his ass. And Luther's like, oh my god, there are other people like him. This is where he says this line. Revenge isn't worth much if you end up dead.
So true.
Which is something that later in this episode gets parroted by a different character. But he's like, this is not, like you're gonna get killed for this. Like, this is, like, other hunters are gonna come. And she's like, okay, but look what else I got. And she pulls out the Colt revolver. And he's like, oh my god, how did you get that? And she's like, that bitch had it, and now we have it. And then he's like, actually, do you want to make out? And then they make out, like, a lot.
There's a lot of things in this episode with the vampires that are very, like, early 2000s, them trying to be, like, slay about vampires, like, Interview with a Vampire, and instead an Our Buffy, and it's just, like, it's just network television cringe. It's
absolutely
just cringe.
I can't imagine watching this, like, if I was like a teenager watching this with my parents. I definitely did watch this episode with my mom at one point, and I just I think I've blacked it out.
Yeah, it's not
shout out to my mom. I know she's listening. So we see another sort of confrontation between Sam and John. And Sam is like, why are you even doing this? Like, what is even the point? Like, we don't know what's going on. And they're just having an argument. While they're tracking the vampires. And eventually John is like, okay, so there's all these rumors and all these myths about, like, sunlight and stakes and whatever. The only way you can kill a vampire is by beheading them. Dean's like, okay, well, when we find this nest, we can't just, like, run in, because that seems like a bad idea if we can only kill them by beheading them. And John's like, actually, that is the plan. And they're like, well, why do you need the gun so bad? And John is like, well, like I said, it can kill anything, even a demon, like the one that killed your mom. So now we're like, oh, John is looking for this revolver so he can kill the demon that killed Mary. So we're coming around. We're now understanding why this is the case he actually decided to, show up for and help.
And he's like, hey guys, so actually there's been, like, all this stuff. And they're like, this is so much information at once. This is so much. Oh my god.
And then they're like, okay, well, great. Well, you'll get the gun and then we'll go kill the demon that killed mom. And he's like, actually, I think I'll get the gun and I'll go kill the demon that killed mom. You guys can do your thing. And they're like, okay, but we're stronger. Dean's like, we are stronger together. Like, we shouldn't be splitting up again. And John's like, okay, but if I'm around you guys, it's going to impact my decision-making skills. And Dean's like, so you can't be as reckless as normal. And this is, like, the first time we really see Dean, like, disagreeing with his dad.
Yeah, he's having a slay moment, actually.
He's finally like, oh my god, dude.
Well, yeah, because him and Sam are fighting, and then Dean's like, hey, Dad, actually, you're fucking wrong. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
First steps to coming out of the closet.
They go to the nest, right? They find it. It's the middle of the day. And they see the vampires going in. And Dean's like, oh my god, you're right. They don't get hurt by the sun. Fuck. But John's like, okay. We're just gonna go in, get the gun, and leave. So they go in to get the gun. And they're all, like, tiptoeing around looking. And Sam finds this girl who's, like, tied up. And he's like, oh my god, there's like a person in here. So he goes to be like, hey, we're gonna get you out of here, it's gonna be fine. She like jumps up and her teeth are displayed, like she has been turned. And then she screams, Sam screams, everybody starts screaming. So they're like, okay, well, it's done, we gotta go. So they all run out and they're like, well, that was useless. Great. So now what? So like our plan didn't work. Obviously now they know we're coming. And John's like, they have our scent. And when a vampire gets your scent, it never loses it. So we're kind of fucked. And Sam and Dean are like, okay, well, like, we have to be able to do something. And John's like, okay, Dean, you need to go to a funeral home and obtain a dead man's blood.
Yeah, let me just, like, get that real quick from a funeral home.
Yeah, you need to get a dead man's blood, which will poison the vampires. So Dean goes to the funeral home. Sam and John go back to the hotel. Sam is pacing. He's like, it shouldn't be taking him this long. You should have called. And John's like, Dean's got it. You need to take a chill pill. It's gonna be fine. And they have this conversation where John is like, Sam, when you were born, I put $100 into a savings account for you and one for your brother too as a college fund. And I put $100 in that every once a month so that you guys could be able to afford to go to college. And then he's like, Sam, I was doing that because this is not the life I wanted for you. And at some point along this path, I changed. And your mother's death changed me. And I stopped being your dad and I started being your drill sergeant. And that's not who I should have been. And they have this very heartfelt moment. And then Sam is like, oh, well, I feel like you and I are more alike now than we ever were because I lost Jess and you lost Mom. Like, I get it. I get being upset and I get the anger. So what did happen to that money? And John's like, I did spend it on ammo.
And then Sam's like, ha 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 ha. And I'm like, what the fuck?
No, I'm like, John, you should die. Anyway.
Once again, I hate you, girly.
Yeah. And also, the entire conversation does not ever apologize, just so you guys know.
Nope.
So then, as they are having this very touching moment, touching in big, big ass air quotes, Dean returns, and he's got this little vial, and he's like, guys, you're never gonna believe how easy it was to walk into a funeral home and just get this.
And we're like, I wish I had seen that, because that's just crazy.
Yeah, I want to see Dean infiltrate a funeral home. That'd be hilarious. John is like, okay, we're gonna split up. The next scene we see is Dean parked on the side of the road, fucking around with the car. And then Kate, the girl, the female vampire, walks up and she's like, hey. And he's like, oh my gosh, hey. And she's like, do you think I could give you a ride back to my place? And he's like, haha, I draw the line at necrophilia. And she's like, oh, okay, so I'm a vampire, so I'm gonna attack you now. And she runs up to Dean and starts, like, trying to beat the shit out of him. Like, she has him by the neck. And then a crossbow bolt shoots through her sternum. And she's like, oh, that wasn't very nice. Who did that? And she turns around and John is there. And she's like, okay, well, you think a crossbow bolt is gonna kill me? And he's like, no, but it is covered in dead man's blood, so you are about to feel very poisoned and not very good. And then he's like, okay, boys, time to split up.
Call an ambulance, but not for me.
Yeah. And then he's like, okay, guys, I'm gonna go and drive around with this girl because vampires mate for life. So her mate is gonna come looking for her. So while we're out, you guys can go back and, like, not be here so I don't do anything stupid.
When they do vampires mate for life, I was like, oh, so they took that thing from Twilight. Okay. They took the Mormon part from Twilight, but nothing else. Okay. Let's unpack there. But also, it's interesting about Benny. Anyway.
Yeah. So John is like, guys, you need to go. I'm going to trade Kate for the Colt. He is going to come for her because he's going to care more about protecting her than he is about protecting the gun. So John is just kind of driving around, and he's like, hee hee hee, having such a fun time. And then he sees the cars of the vampires and he's like, okay, slay. So he's like, pulls over and he pulls Kate out and he has like a machete up to her neck and he's like, hey, you're Luther, right? And Luther's like, yeah. Can I please have my girlfriend back? And he's like, why don't you put the Colt down on the ground and I'll take it? And he's like, you know, you can't kill all of us at once. Like, there's not that many bullets. You can't take us all out. We'll win. And he's like, I don't really care about killing you. It's not about you is the thing. So I'm going to take it and we're going to go our separate ways. And Luther's like, okay, fine. He puts the Colt on the ground. And John starts sort of walking up to pick it up. But John does have a little bit of a little trip. And Luther's like, aw, you almost made it. And then just starts beating the shit out of him and knocks him out. And meanwhile, we see Sam and Dean at the vampire nest just fucking killing bitches left and right. Then we cut back and Luther is looking down at John and he's like walking up about to kill him. But then Sam and Dean show up because they were like, we did what we had to do at the nest, but now we're here to save our dad because we are not following his orders because we are better as a family. So
Good soldiers don't follow orders.
so true. So they start like fighting the vampires and Luther gets distracted and John grabs the Colt and shoots Luther in the head. The gun works and his head gets all like gray and decrepit. It's very scary. And it proves that you can kill supernatural beings with this bullet, with this gun. And then all of the other vampires are like, okay, fuck this, goodbye. So.
But before Luther dies, he says something that this is kind of a theme that they use vampires to explore again and again on the show is we have just as much of a right to live as you guys. Like, we're people too. And whenever they want to bring that up of like that some of the monsters are people, like werewolves or vampires or whatever, that's when they bring vampires back usually. And that's the first time they kind of introduce that. He's like, and why don't we get to live? That's a little fucked up, don't you think? John Winchester's like, I don't really give a shit. Which is funny because he's like, I care about saving people. And then this time around, he's like, oh, they can live and keep killing people. I have to go kill a demon. Bye.
Shit was crazy.
John Winchester, you are not sly.
John Winchester is off the shits. But he is like, now John is like, okay. It's a little later. Sam, Dean, and John are shooting the shit. And John is like, yeah, you didn't follow my orders. And Sam is like, no, sir. And he's like, yeah, well, maybe you're right. Maybe we are stronger as a family. Maybe we should stick together to hunt down the demon that killed your mom. And that's the end of the episode.
Yeah, and then it's like, and of course, this is like, we're in the end game now, boys. Also, apparently according to the wiki, that there's a Latin passage etched on the barrel of the Colt that translates to "I will fear no evil," which is a reference to a actual verse in the Bible. I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and I will fear no evil. So, Bible fan fiction. This is literally, they're like, what if we took a Bible verse and then we put it on a gun? Like, this is Americana right here. This is as American as it gets. And he drives around in a Ford truck. Also, one of the two vampires to escape, she does come back later. I
Is
forgot
that in
about
the finale? Or in the second to last episode? Yeah.
Oh my god.
She's
about the rusty nail. It really does.
She is one of the ones in the Rusty Nail episode.
I was saying that as a joke, but she actually does. Holy shit.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so like vampires, they are quite important to the brothers' story. They come up at pivotal points, like now and like at the end. So So sometimes we do a little segment called Actual Queer Media You Should Watch Instead of Supernatural, where something comes out that we think that fans of Supernatural might like, that you can watch instead, that is actually good. This week I'd like to give a huge shout out to the show Dead End Paranormal Park. Obviously, for those who like things of the paranormal, it is an animated show. It has a bunch of fun people in the voice cast. Like Alex Brightman does a whole number where it's clear that he is the Beetlejuice guy. And MJ Rodriguez is in it from Pose. There's just a lot of people. Two stars of the show are an autistic girl and a trans guy. It's very slay. It's made with queer people and lots of queer people in it, and there's a little demon girl in it as well. And if you are like a fan of theme parks or of Dollywood or of drag queens or of weird shit happening with angels and demons, this show's for you. But it's also just like a cool cartoon. I honestly compared it to, it's like Gravity Falls and Infinity Train. It's like, imagine if there were creepy shit happening, but you were realizing things about yourself. Very much Over the Garden Wall as well. There is a musical episode that is also, that's why I mentioned the Alex Brightman Beetlejuice thing. It's very slay, and it's a Netflix show that's probably not going to get enough marketing, so go watch it like right now, because Netflix will be like, it's a flop, we're canceling it. Don't let them cancel this fucking show, because I love it so much.
And what's also really neat about this show is that it's not just like, oh yeah, there's like gay people in it. It's like they are explicitly like, the character in it is like explicitly like, I am transgender.
He's like, I'm trans, and here's my whole like storyline with my family, and it's not like an overly traumatic kind of deal. Like it's not like, oh, we're gonna, you'll see, it's quite good. It's just good in every sense of the way. It is based on a comic. The animation is cool and fun and funky fresh. Also, there's references to pretty much every piece of pop culture in it. There's several Star Wars references. I think there's a Shrek reference, but somebody else said that it wasn't. Claire said that it wasn't one. There's really fun references in it as well, and I think it's very slay and kind of like Supernatural, which is such a. I'm so sorry, Dead End, that I would do this to you. But the whole plot has to do with demons, and then kind of at the end they're like, so what about angels? And they like mention that. That's not a big spoiler. I will not mention anything else, which is kind of exactly what happens in Supernatural. They do all this shit with demons, and they're like, hey, so what about angels? So yeah, anyways, go watch Dead End instead. Anyway, let's talk about the second episode, which is part 2 of our 3-part finale of season 1, which is called Salvation. I miss when television was this long. So it opens on Blue Earth, Minnesota, where there's a priest and he's reading the Bible at an altar. I love when they do church episodes in Supernatural, because you know the shit's gonna get crazy.
Yeah, and from the moment this dude shows up, it's like, oh, he is off the shits.
Yeah, and immediately, our special girl boss bestie, Meg, walks into a church.
Let's go!
Which, if we knew from the earlier episodes, like with the ghosts and whatever, like that's hallowed ground. Like, her walking into a church is crazy. She walks into a church, she's fine. And she's like pretending, and she's like, yeah, I'm just like really having a hard time. And the priest is like, that's totally fine. I'm here to talk to people, whatever. And she's like, I've done some really bad things. And he's like, salvation is there for all who seek it. And then she's like, yeah, like I did some really bad things. Like I was having a conversation with somebody just like the one I was having with you now. And then I murdered him. And he's like, oh shit, I know what you are. And then her eyes turned black and she's like, tee-hee. And he starts running to this underground office where he has fucking guns and knives and shit everywhere. And you're like, okay, this man is clearly both a priest and a hunter. I would love to know more about him. He seems very slay. He's a priest and a hunter. Like, why is this? It's very funny. My partner Claire was like, why does this priest have all these guns? And I was like, well, because he's a hunter, but also like, this is America. You know what I mean? Like, he's a small town preacher. Probably him having a bunch of guns is probably on brand.
Yeah, and I also think like The idea that in this world where we have demons who are repelled by religious iconography and monsters who are repelled by religious iconography, it makes sense that at least some priests probably know some things.
Yeah. And so he has a bunch of research and he has like runes and stuff on the wall. And Meg follows him in. She like busts down the doors that he has like barred, and he throws a knife at her and she catches it, and he's like, what do you want? Like, how the fuck are you here? This is hallowed ground. And she's like, oh, that's cute, but that, like, I think she says like, oh, that works in the little leagues, but like not with people like me. Like, she's like, call an ambulance, but not for me. That's literally her. And she's like, where's John Winchester? Where is he? And it's basically implied that they're friends. And he's like, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to fucking tell you that. And then she like slits his throat and he fucking dies. So we flash back to Manning, Colorado. We're back with the boys and their dad. And John is now following what his sons asked, and he is sharing 20 years worth of research with his sons. And he's like, okay, here's everything I have. And here's the trail I followed. It's really hard to follow them, but I figured out a pattern. And there's these telltale signs when a demon shows up. There's like crops failing and like livestock dying and like weird storms that'll happen. And I know that it's happened. I looked back and it happened right before your mother died, and it happened in Palo Alto right before Jess died. And I just thought it was very funny. What does that look like in Palo Alto?
No, so true. I didn't even think about that. Like, interesting. Oh no, all of the crops in Palo Alto are dying.
The cows. Or there's all these storms, and they're like, oh my god, my smartphone isn't working. Well, those days it was like a fucking BlackBerry, but and so he's like, okay, there's all these signs. And so then Sam starts to get upset. And then he's like, okay, and the other sign is that it always happens with a family that has a baby on the baby's 6-month birthday. And we don't know why. And that's just what happens. And Sam starts to feel guilty. And he's like, so it's my fault. So it's my fault for both my mom and for Jess. It's my fault. And I like, what do I do? And Dean says something incredibly emotionally intelligent. He's like, of course it's not your fault. And he's like, he's like, if it's not my fault, it's my problem. And he's like, it's not your problem, it's our problem. And I was like, wow, Dean, okay, that's kind of...
No, Dean is slaying so hard in this episode.
Yeah.
It's insane. Like, he also has a conversation, like, later in this episode with his dad where I'm like, Dean, you are the only bitch I respect.
Yeah. You're like, okay, all right, more of this. And both John and Dean are like, stop, like, it's not your fault, like, there's a pattern, there's a wider pattern here, the truth is out there, it's not about you. And Sam is like, okay, why do they want these kids, like, what's the deal? We haven't answered that question yet, spoilers. So he's like, hey, so the signs, they're starting again in this place called Salvation, Iowa, and we need to go save them also because that's where the demon's gonna be, and now we have the gun. So they are on the road, they're cruising, and their dad pulls off the road, and they follow him, and they're like, what happened? And he gets out the car, and he's like upset, and he's like, I just got off the phone, Pastor Jim just got killed, and it was probably the demon.
Which I will say, in one of our earlier episodes, there was a Pastor Jim mention, and both of us were like, who is Pastor Jim?
Yeah, I forgot.
We completely forgot about this dude.
Yeah, so when they were kids and he would leave them alone, he's like, if anything happens, just call Pastor Jim, whatever. So, like, clearly he did tell his kids about some of them, and this was Pastor Jim. And he's like, it's probably been the demons, we gotta go. And it's clearly because he was connected to me. Like, we gotta end this. And he's like, we have to find the next family, and we have to end this. And John's like upset. He's like, this has to end now. I'm ending it. And he goes, I don't care what it takes. Well, and they're basically like, how are we going to find this baby? And he's like, I need you to get all the hospital records in the area of Salvation, Iowa to find out who has a baby that's going to turn 6 months old. And Dean and Sam are like, that's going to take fucking forever. And he's like, oh, well, can you think of any other ideas? And I'm like, how are they going to get the hospital records? But and also, like,
that is a question that I come up because the next scene, sorry for spoilers for the next scene, but Sam and Dean split up, and it shows Dean like at the hospital going through hospital records, and I'm like, are birth certificates public record? Like, can you just do that?
Yeah, they don't keep them at the hospital. Like, I don't think that's...
Some places do.
Oh, I don't know. But yeah, he was sitting there like it was like a library. And I was like, at the hospital?
Also, the woman working at, like, I guess this records storage unit at the hospital,
Yeah.
she was not wearing scrubs. She was wearing, like, a V-neck sweater, and I was like, and I know if the sole reason was so Dean could be like, hey, baby, anyway.
Yeah.
And he does have, like, a police badge, so I guess you can access it, but it was just weird.
He randomly flirts with a woman, and you're like, okay, all right. She's there to just, like, look pretty, and him to be like, hey, oh, sorry, I'm working right now. Anyways. And you're like, oh, my God, Dean, calm down. Dean goes around, and then Sam is also looking at another medical center, and he leaves with some birth records, and he, like, breaks down in pain. Like, he starts to have a vision, and his head is splitting outside of the hospital, and he has a vision of the demon's next target. He sees this woman, he sees her running, he sees the woman seeing the demon over the crib, like the same thing that has happened to him and to Jess and to whatever over and over.
What happens is Sam, in this vision, hears the sound of a train. So
Yes.
he's like, okay, it's got to be near train tracks. So he starts looking at places that are near train tracks in town, and he just goes and, like, walks around by the train tracks.
Yeah, and he sees a woman walking by with a baby carrier, and he goes up to her and he's like, hey, I just moved in down the street, just wanted to, like, introduce myself, whatever. And he's like, oh, your baby is really cute, like, how old is she, whatever. And she's like, actually, she's exactly 6 months. And he's like, cool, amazing, well, take care of yourself. And then he, like, sadly, like, looks like the dad is coming home and whatever, and he's like, he's having a moment. Like, Sam is, like, having a moment. So he's like, okay, well, there's nothing I can do. So he goes back to Dean and to his dad, and he's like, hey, so by the way, I've been having visions, and I had a vision about these people, and I know who it is. And John's like, so none of you were gonna tell me that Sam has started having motherfucking visions. And Dean is like, okay.
This is Dean's biggest slay in this episode.
Yeah.
Come through.
Yeah, Dean is like, okay, first of all, like, we didn't know if it was, like, a fluke at first. We didn't know what the fuck it was. And, like, we were trying to figure it out for a bit. So, like, calm down. And also, and then he's like, well, you could have called me. And he's like, we did. We tried to call you. I almost fucking died at one point, and Sam tried to call you, and you didn't answer. So try me again, bitch. I was like, oh my God. Which is true. Like, they tried to call him a bunch of times, and he didn't fucking answer. And John's like, okay, that's on me. And
he's like, true, maybe you snapped on that one.
Yeah. And so then Sam's phone rings, and it's fucking Meg, the demon, and she's like, hey, it's me. And Sam's like, oh fuck. And they thought she was dead. They thought she fell out of a window in the last couple of episodes, whatever, even though she didn't, but they don't know that. And she's like, I need to speak to your dad. And he's like, my dad's not here. And she's like, I know you're fucking lying. I know you're lying. And he's like, okay, maybe so. And then he answered the phone, and she's like, I murdered Pastor Jim, and I'm with another one of your friends, Caleb, and I'm gonna kill him if you don't tell me where that motherfucking gun is. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, whatever. And she's like, oh really? And then she, like, makes him hear her kill his friend Caleb on the phone, another hunter. And she's like, I'm
and also Caleb was the person who called him to be like, hey, Pastor Jim just fucking died.
Yeah.
So, like, they were talking earlier in the episode.
And right before she kills him, he's like, hey, like, don't give anything away, whatever. And then she kills him. So, she's like, hey, I'm going to keep killing all of your friends until you give us the gun. And John's like, okay, I'll go to Lincoln and whatever. And she's like, okay, can you come at midnight? And he's like, well, it's going to take me like 3 days to get there. Because I can't, and he goes, because I can't get on a plane with a gun. And she's like,
oh my God, logical King John Winchester.
Yeah, post TSA.
And and she's like, I don't really care. Get here by midnight. And he's like, what the fuck? And the boys, they're like, hey, I don't think we should do that. And John's like, I got a plan. Here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go to an antique store and I'm gonna buy a fancy looking old gun and dupe her. And they're like, because she doesn't know what it looks like. And the other ones are like, the boys, they're like, you can't just fucking Scooby Doo it. Like you can't just be like, oh, here's a fake gun. Like,
and John was like, why not? Give me a reason why I can't do this.
He's like, why isn't it gonna work? Why? And he's like, I'm just trying to buy some time. And they're like, buy some time for what? And they're like, because you guys have to go and finish the job with the real gun and save this family. Because I need this fucking thing to be over. And he's like, I know I've been waiting all this time to like do this thing, but he's like, I'm not gonna be able to. So you have to do it. And they're like, no, we have to stay together. Like the whole thing was that we're supposed to stay together. We can't do this alone. And he's like, I can't. So and so John goes and gets the fake gun, whatever, he comes back. And they have this very emotional conversation, like before they leave out by like some train tracks. And they're like, it's very symbolic of like crossroads in life. You know what I mean? Whatever the fuck. There's nothing symbolic in Supernatural. It's all fucked up, you know. But like
Supernatural has symbolism, but as we've said on this podcast before, it is never intentional.
Yeah, it is by accident. And they're like, hey, Dad, like, please don't talk like you're gonna die. Like, don't go throw your life away. This is a trap. And he's like, they're like, you're no good to us, Dad. And he's like, well, you're no good to me, Dad, either. So make sure you survive this, whatever. And like, here's the real cult. You have to do this. Please finish what I started. Very Kylo Ren of him. and they're like, Dad, what the fuck? And then he leaves. And so he goes to Lincoln to meet Meg. And it's basically like, is it a factory? Like, I don't even know what the fuck it is. It's like something down by a river.
Yeah, it's kind of like a warehouse almost.
Yeah. So there's this like weird, it's very like dark, weird warehouse kind of place. He gets there and he's like, okay, I'm going to look for escape routes. I'm going to look for traps, whatever. And he finds like a water reservoir on the top of the building. And so, and he says a prayer. He has a rosary in his hand. He says a prayer and he like throws it in there. Clearly he's going to bless the water so that it's holy water, which could hurt her because she's a demon. And I'm like, okay, but you can't bless the water. A priest has to. That's not what makes it holy water. I'm going to step in as a Catholic.
John Winchester, maybe he got ordained.
I can't with that. That's how he became friends with Pastor Jim.
Exactly.
I was like, that's not how you make holy water. You don't just like say a prayer and drop in a rosary. Like, that's not how it works. I don't even think that's how it works in the rest of the series. So basically he runs around, he blesses this water, which I don't think is going to work. And meanwhile, the boys are outside this family's house and they're watching over the family, and then it flashes back to John, and Meg gets there. She's kind of scouting around, whatever. And then he finally confronts her and she's like, I brought a little friend, and there's this other demon and his name is Tom. I just love how his name is just Tom. And, he's like, okay, fine. And he acts all like, oh, I don't want to do it. And he hands her the gun, which is the fake gun. And, she's like, okay. She's looking at it and she hands it to Tom. And she's like, do you think it's the real thing? And then the other demon spins around and it's like, and he shoots Meg, clearly to test if it's real. And she's like, hey.
Yeah, she's like, you just fucking shot me, dude.
Why did you shoot me? But then she doesn't die. And then she's like, wait a minute. You fucking lied. And John's like, yeah, of course I fucking did. And
okay, John does say something so funny here. He's like, well, I bet you're happy that it's not real now, huh?
And she's like, okay, you got me, but fuck you. And he starts running, and he releases a valve, and it sprays them with the holy water. So clearly he is ordained, and it slows them down. But then he goes to find that his truck's tires have been slashed, and he's like, fuck. So he starts running, and then he's into like a dead end, and he's trapped, and he's like, I don't know what to do. Then it flashes to the boys. They're at the house.
they recognize that the signs are coming. Like, things are shaking, lights are flashing on and off, etc. Which is like, okay, in the other instances, like, that didn't really happen. They just kind of showed up. But, like, okay, fine. They make it very dramatic. And they're like, okay. So they break into the house to save these people. And they're going to the nursery, whatever. And the dad is like on the bottom floor and is like, oh my God, why are you trying to rob my house? And they're like, no, actually, we're trying to help you. And he's like, I don't fucking believe you. And Sam, then they hear a scream, and then Sam runs upstairs, and he's and Dean's like, hey, don't let your wife go in the nursery. And they're like, what are you talking about? And then they hear a scream, and Sam's like, fuck. And he runs upstairs, and he sees that she's walked in there, and that the yellow-eyed demon is now standing over the baby's crib. And he's like, fuck. And the mom is like slowly, like, she's being dragged up the side of the wall so that she'll be on the ceiling. And Sam's like, oh, and then he hesitates, and then he fires. But the demon has already like vanished before it hits him. So now he's wasted a bullet. And he grabs her off the wall because she then falls because the demon is gone. And then Dean busts in and saves the baby. And then as soon as he does, then the crib catches on fire, and then the rest of the house catches on fire. And I think this is the first time we see the yellow eyes of the demon, right? This is like, that's how they call him, the yellow-eyed demon. This is the first time we see it. This is very important because it's different, because most other demons, they have black eyes, which they really abandoned at in the later seasons. They're like, fuck it, we're not doing this anymore. So they're like, shit, we fucked it up. And so then they're outside and they look, and Sam is like, I gotta go back. I gotta kill him. I missed. Whatever. And Dean's like, absolutely not. You're gonna fucking die. No, we're leaving. Whatever. And Sam's like, I gotta end this. And
yeah, he's like, the house is burning to the ground.
Yeah, like, he's
do
like,
not
the
go in
house
there.
On fire.
What's also hilarious is during this scene, Dean runs outside with the baby, and the dad is like, get away from my baby and my family. And the mom is like, no, honey, they saved us. I'm obsessed with the dad because he's like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah, which makes sense.
And now
like,
my house is on fire?
Yeah, and she's like, no, like, they saved my life. And then, so they're back at the hotel room, and Dean and Sam are like, we can't get in contact with our dad. Something clearly has happened. What do we do? And Sam is like, why'd you fucking stop me? We only had one chance. And Dean's like, and Dean says that same thing as before.
That the vampire said in the last episode.
Does he say it exactly?
He says, almost exactly, he says, that, like, revenge isn't worth your life. Like, this is not worth your life. And Dean also was like, in fact, if killing this thing means that you have to die for it, then I never want to find it. Because I would rather, like, revenge is no good if you're dead. Like,
this is far more emotionally intelligent than Dean gets in later seasons.
No, literally. Dean is like, Sam, you and Dad are the only two people that I have. If you die, like, it'll be over for me.
Yeah, and it gets quite dark there. And Sam's like, okay, fine. And they're like, okay, we have to find our dad. And they keep calling their dad. And then Meg answers their dad's phone. And she's like, hey, so you're never going to see your dad again. And they're like, to be continued. And you're like, what? Like, truly, I remember watching this for the first time and being like, fuck, I'm riveted.
Yeah, like, there's a cliffhanger.
Damn.
Hello?
If they had aired this on TV, I would have been like, oh, I would have been shocked and appalled. Also, no spoilers. We're going to talk about the finale next week. But, like, the end of the season is also a cliffhanger. So they really go fucking crazy with this one. So, also, this is the first time that this is something that I forgot to say at the beginning. A very classic Supernatural thing is, at the season finale, doing the road so far montage. And they usually play Carry On Wayward Son by Kansas, which is the song everybody knows is associated with Supernatural. The unofficial theme song, they play it over the road so far and in the season finale. This is the first time that they do that, although this is the second to last episode of the season, which is why some people think it's a 2-part or 3-part kind of finale, which is it kind of makes sense because they kind of to be continued it. Funnily enough, when we watched this on Netflix, it doesn't have Carry On Wayward Son during the
Yeah, it was weird. I was like, I noticed it it was a different song, and I was like, what? What is this?
I remember watching it originally and being like, oh, they don't do Carry On Wayward Son until later. Apparently they do. Maybe it was a licensing issue or something like that. They do in later seasons, or season 2 onward. Maybe you have to go look it up on YouTube or something like that. But yeah, this is the first appearance of that cursed motherfucking song. We'll get into our whole season 1 recap next week.
And with that, thank you for listening. For more cursed supernatural content, follow us on social media at Mystery Spotcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also ask us cursed supernatural questions in our TikTok Q&A or by emailing us at themysteryspotcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed listening to us suffer, please consider rating and reviewing us wherever you get your podcasts, but especially Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, and Overcast. It really helps us, and it helps people discover our show. If you want to hear more from us, we're also 2 of the co-hosts of RuPaul's Pod Race, a queer Star Wars podcast. So yeah, we'll see you there. And we'll see you 2 Tuesdays from now for more slaying people, queer baiting things, the supernatural business.